Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for Lowepost.com, and I'm back again with the next lesson in our Conform tutorial series. And in this lesson, I want to talk about conforming a Media Composer timeline into DaVinci Resolve. Now, we're going to take a look at two scenarios. One is going to be conforming an HD timeline from Media Composer to Resolve. Then we're going to take it one step further and show you how you can take that Media Composer timeline, relink to all of the 4K material, and then have yourself set to do a 4K conform inside of DaVinci Resolve. All right, let's keep the introduction short. Let's just get into Avid Media Composer and let's get started. All right, so let's Command or Alt and Tab into Avid Media Composer. And once there, you'll see that we have a timeline all set up to go to send to DaVinci Resolve. Now, a couple things that I want to point out about this timeline that I have done intentionally. I have put in a few effects and an element that I know will not transfer over to Resolve. Now, the reason that I've done this is because I want you to see what Resolve will do when it comes in contact with elements or effects that it does not understand. And what I've also done, it's pretty much impossible to tell, is that one of the clips in this timeline is actually at offline resolution. All of the other clips are at HD resolution, and we'll talk about how we can relink to the original 4K media in just a little bit. But the reason that I threw that offline clip in there is because I want to show you how easy it is to run into problems if you're not paying close attention to what's going on. All right, now the first thing that we're going to need to do is to get this AAF out of Media Composer. Now there's a few ways that we can do it. I'm just going to go with what I always find is the easiest way, is I'm just going to right click on the sequence window and I'm going to navigate down to export. Now I'm brought to the export window and you'll notice that I have a DNX HD 175 MXF export setting, which is what I have my exported reference clip exported as. And you'll notice I don't have anything else in here. So let's set up a new export preset. And for this, we're going to navigate to AAF. I'm going to leave Use Marks, Use Selected Tracks, and I will not include inactive audio tracks because we don't really care about audio. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that when you're exporting an HD timeline, you can include just video in your export. You can include video and audio or just video. When you're exporting a larger than HD AAF, it requires you to export audio as well, even if you don't have any audio in your timeline. So just keep that in mind. To be honest, because we don't have any audio, it really doesn't matter whether I export just video or video and audio. So we'll leave it as both. This way we don't have to worry if we're going to export a larger than HD project. Okay, now we got a few settings in here. We can export as a certain type, we can render, we can mix down with lots of stuff in here. But to be honest, you don't need to worry about any of it, because our export method is going to be linked to don't export media. Now, for the purpose of what we're doing to begin with the HD export or the HD conform inside of Resolve, we're going to be referencing the media that's actually located inside of our external hard drive inside of Avid Media Files, MXF1, and here is all the media. Okay. Now, when we switch over to do our 4K conform, you'll see that we'll reference the original media that's located in a different place on the hard drive. Okay, so I'm just going to head back into Media Composer. We're linking to both, don't need to select anything. And what we're going to do is do a little save as here. We'll call this AAF for Resolve. Okay, we'll say OK. I will say save, and I will send this to the desktop. We'll call it from Media Composer. Okay, and I'll say save. You'll see it took, what, 2 seconds to export that? Now, obviously, if you've got a longer, more complex timeline, it might take 5 or 6 seconds. But since we're not exporting any media, it's a fairly quick export. Okay, so let's hide out of Media Composer now. Now, I have this reference clip, and all this basically is just an exported, mixed down version of my timeline. This could be an H.264, MP4.mov, or it could be a ProRes for that matter. Okay, so I'm just going to quit out of Switch, let's Command or Alt and Tab into DaVinci Resolve. Okay, now what we want to do right off the bat is we don't even need to worry about the media pool, believe it or not, because the media pool is going to be populated based on that AAF file. So let's do this. I'm going to navigate to File. I'm going to come down to Import Timeline, and I'm going to select Import AAF, EDL, and XML. Now I'm going to head to the desktop. There's our AAF file. I'm going to say open. Now, once I say open, in a lot of cases what happens is people don't really pay too much attention to this window. A couple things I want to point out right off the bat. The timeline name and the starting time code. This is referencing the name of the AAF that came from Media Composer and the time code that came from Media Composer. And we are working at 1920 by 1080. Okay, I'm now just going to say OK. We'll give Resolve a second here. It's going to load up our timeline. There you go. You'll see 1 of 10 clips were not yet found. Do you want to select another folder to search? Now, most people right away say, oh yeah, I should go somewhere else and look for what the file is that's missing, but I know what file is missing. So I'm actually just going to say no, don't bother going and searching. Now, you'll notice that as soon as I select that, I'm now brought to the log window, which is going to tell me what effects, or in this case, clips, are not supported in the transfer from Media Composer to Resolve. Now, that clip that it was looking for was actually the title, and titles are not supported in the crossover in the AAF. Now, you'll see a couple other things. We got a color correction effect, and there's that title, which is basically these two bottom ones are the title. Okay, and this is the color correction effect that I had down here somewhere towards the end. I think it was on this, but you'll notice if I say close, our time warps transferred over perfectly. All of our dissolves transferred over. There's our title. I'm just going to hit D to turn it off, and you'll see now as I drag through, something else has happened. I seem to recall in Media Composer, if I Command and Tab back there, that was actually small in the lower left-hand corner, so something's happened here. Now, I also know that with a couple clips in here, I did have some artificial moves on them. Okay, and I'll show you how we can get in and worry about that in just a second. But let's first talk about that little renegade clip that's living in my timeline, that offline resolution clip that we need to track down. Because the last thing you want is everything, looking beautiful at DNX 175 or DNX 220, and you've got that one clip in there at DNX 36. So how are we going to figure this out? What I'm going to do is just select the first clip, and I'm going to head to the metadata window. Okay, now you'll see in the metadata window right at the top, I'm told this is DNX HD 115. Perfect. If I click through DNX HD 115, 115, we're good, 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 and not good. So the metadata window is a fantastic way to see immediately if you have any issues, technical issues that come up with your clip. Now, we could deal with this one of two ways. To be honest, because it's one clip, I could probably just go in and replace this myself. If, however, you ran into a situation where you had an entire timeline, let's say half the clips were at DNX HD 36, that's when you'd want to get the Media Composer editor involved to get in and to swap that out before they send you that AAF export. Okay? Now, I did say something else was going on here because there's something that we should have done when we were bringing this timeline into Resolve. And let's just do that right now because we need to pay a little bit better attention. I'm just going to select everything and delete it. I'm going to come back to File, Import Timeline, Import AAF. I'm going to select that AAF file and say Open. Okay. Now, there's a couple other options here that I want to make you aware of. The one that I was just referencing, the size or the transform information, can actually be turned on right here. Use sizing information. So I'm going to turn that on. Now, one thing that I also love, you'll remember that we had the log come up and tell us that we had some issues with some effects and with some clips. We can import log messages as markers. So I'm going to turn that on as well, and you'll see that we even have the ability to select what color marker we want to use. Now, because these are log issues, red is probably a pretty good color to go with because it will draw our eye to it immediately. I'm going to go back and say OK again. Now, keep in mind that title will still be offline, and that's fine. I'm just going to say no, don't look for it anywhere else. You'll see now I've been told, here's the log again. I'm just going to say close. I'm going to come up here, and you'll see now what's happened is that two markers have been placed in my timeline. Let's just hit D to turn that off. You'll see now our transformation has come across. You'll also notice it there. There's my artificial zoom on the boats. Let's actually just drag our window down a little bit here. Perfect. Okay. And last but certainly not least, you'll see down here, this shot here, if I come back, is where the color effect is right here. Okay, it was on this shot. It started at no saturation and the saturation faded in. So again, a very handy way to get in and have a very visual idea of exactly what's happening when you have issues. Okay, so let's actually move on, and I want to talk now about how we can get in and link to the original 4K media. And believe it or not, it was in the exact same window that we were just in. Again, you just need to dig a little bit deeper and look a little bit closer to find the information that you need. Again, I'm going to select everything. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to say remove. I'm going to come to File. I'm going to come to Import Timeline. You'll see the shortcut there, Command Shift and I on the Mac, Control Shift and I for all my Windows friends. We'll say Open. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to use sizing information. We're going to import log messages as that red marker, and we're going to link to the original source camera files. Okay. Now I can't remember off the top of my head what the resolution of that media was, but don't worry, we can adjust that in just a second. I'm going to say okay. Again, that one clip is offline, no problem. Again, same log information. Let's turn this off. And to be honest, you're not going to notice really any difference, except for the fact that if you now select one of these clips and you take a look over here at the metadata, we're now dealing with a clip that's 3840 by 2160. Okay, so what we can do now is simply come to File, come to the Project Settings. Inside the Project Settings, we're just going to switch this. We're actually going to make it custom, and we're going to set this to be 3840 by 2160. I'm now going to say Save. The frame will adjust its size, and now this is all set to go. Okay, so we've talked about how to fix problems. Now let's talk about bringing in that offline reference file and working with it. So let's do that right now. Now I'm going to do this one of two ways because, to be honest, I'm not going to say that I'm paranoid when it comes to me doing conforming, but I like to go through things a couple times to make sure that I have everything the way that I want it. And I like to do it in a couple steps. Now the first step that I normally will do, and I'm just going to switch back to my thumbnails here for a second, is I like to bring in, let's just bring in my reference clip here from the desktop. I'll just select a new window. I'm just going to drag it from the desktop right in there. And what I'll normally do is bring that reference clip to the topmost layer like such, just line everything up. And then what I will do is I will head back to the inspector, okay? I will switch the composite mode from normal to be overlay. Now the reason that I do this is just to make sure, more so for timing adjustments and position, rotation, and things like that. This is how I like to make sure that all of my clips are doing exactly what they should be doing, okay? Everything's working exactly the way that I expected here, even through the motion effects. There we go, looking good. And the reason I want to show this to you is that if I come farther down here, I think it's to here, you'll notice, there we go, that things are not exactly as perfect as they should be. My motion is slightly off. Now, to be honest, it's so marginal that I probably wouldn't change anything, but this is why I like to stick that reference clip on the topmost layer and do one pass through. Okay, just to make sure, again, like I said, that everything is positioned where it needs to be, it's rotated where it needs to be, and it's timed the way that it needs to be timed. Okay, so let's talk about another way that we can reference that clip. Okay, and what we're going to do here is we're going to bring up two monitors. Okay, and I'm just going to delete the reference file from the media tool for right now, or the media pool, and I'm going to head back to the media pool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to that clip on the desktop. Now you'll see I have the desktop set in my favorites. Now I'm doing this for a very particular reason. The reason I'm doing it this way, as opposed to just coming to the Finder and taking the clip and dragging and dropping it into my bin, is that if I right click on the clip once it's already in my bin, I don't have the option that I need to set this as an offline reference clip. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just delete this, and I'm going to say remove. And with this reference export, I'm going to right click, and you'll see that I have the ability to get in and to add this as an offline reference clip. Okay, now once I do that, you'll notice that a little icon has appeared here to identify it as that, because you got to remember that you also have the ability to come in and to import elements as matte keys and things like that as well. So keep that in mind. You'll see add to media pool as matte. Okay, now there's no matte in here, and that's why it's not going to do it. But if I was to attempt to do this the other way by dragging and dropping it, it wouldn't come in the way that I want it to. Okay, now one thing you will notice is that if you attempt to take this reference clip and drag it into your timeline, nothing's going to happen, because once it's assigned as that reference clip, it's not designed to work as a normal clip would. So I guess that does beg the question, then how is it supposed to work? Well, let me show you. I'm going to come to our timeline. I'm going to right click. I'm going to come to timelines, and I'm going to come down to link offline reference clip, and I'm going to select what we assigned as the offline reference clip. Now, once I do that, you might be thinking drag and drop. Nope, not at all. What we're now going to do is I'm just going to come down to about here, I think, is we're going to navigate over to the preview window, and I'm going to come right over here to the lower left-hand corner. I'm going to drop that down. You'll notice that right now we're assigned to view the source. So if I start double-clicking on clips, the source will appear there. However, I have the ability to look at offline. Now you might be thinking, well, why would I want to see what's offline? No, we want to see the offline reference clip. So what this now gives us the ability to do is to compare that reference clip that we exported and the conform that we have in our timeline. Now, where do I use this? I always do one pass using the overlay method to take a look to make sure, again, all my timings line up. This is what I use to reference what the editor may have done as far as doing rough color grading, things like that, so I can get an idea of what they, being the editor and director, are going for as far as a look goes, because it gives me a good point of reference. Okay, now let's talk about problems you can run into with this offline reference clip. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to take this clip, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to come to the clip attributes. Now you'll remember Timeline and Media Composer started at 1 hour. Therefore, my export from Media Composer, the MC reference export, starts at 1 hour. Timeline here starts at 1 hour. What if we were to accidentally export this timeline at the 2 hour mark instead of the 1 hour mark? If I say OK, everything seems as though it's OK, except something has happened. Over here in the preview window, I've actually switched back to a clip view and not the actual timeline view or my offline reference view. Okay, well, that's no problem. Let's just come over here. Let's just switch back to offline. Oh, now it's media offline, because now what we've done is we've assigned the reference clip as a 2 hour time code, and it's attempting to match a 1 hour time code. So of course, in the reference file, it doesn't actually exist. So this is how you would get in if you get media offline, and would be able to get in and switch the timecode of the reference file to match the timecode of your timeline. So this way, the offline reference file will always come in exactly the way that you expect it to. So if I right click here, I come back to clip attributes, we set this back to be 1 hour. We'll just set the slate to be 1 hour as well. I'll say OK. Let's just switch this back to be offline, and now everything is all set to go exactly the way that we expect it to be. All right, now as always, if you have any questions, you have any comments or ideas for upcoming lessons or courses, I want you to head on over and post them in our forums at lowepost.com/forums. And if you have any questions for me, you can always send them to kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com.